Welcome to the CHCI Leadership Conference breakout session, made for you and me, protecting our natural resources from climate change. This session is possible due to the gracious contributions from our sponsors, Bayer AG, Corteva Agriscience, Salt River Project, and Cargill. Our panel chair for today's session is Representative Jim Costa from California's 16th Congressional District. As a member of Congress, Representative Costa has applied his farming background to fighting for valley water, agriculture, and the economy. We also welcome Dr. Abelardo De La Vega, Plant Breeding Lead, Latin America, Corteva Agriscience, who will provide welcoming remarks. Our moderator for today's session is Angelique Lizardi, an award-winning broadcast journalist with KVOA-TV in Tucson, Arizona. Please welcome Representative Jim Costa.
Hello, I'm Congressman Jim Costa, and I want to thank the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute for inviting me to participate in one of the most important issues in our generation, and that's the impact of climate change. The Congressional Hispanic Caucus does so many good things every year on raising important issues like immigration reform and the ability to ensure that we have a healthy economy that works for all of our citizens. And as a member of the Hispanic Caucus, we work very closely together. As a member of the House Agriculture Committee and the House Natural Resources Committee, I know the impacts that climate change is having throughout our country and throughout our communities. In California, we've seen horrific wildfires in recent years and extreme drought conditions that puts in jeopardy the food that we grow, that we put on America's dinner table every night. With campesinos and farmers every day working to ensure that that food that is a national security issue is abundant, is healthy, and is affordable. So I can tell you that now is the time for us to work together to address the impacts of climate change, our carbon footprint, and to clean our water systems. All of these are critical issues that we're attempting to address. And President Biden has a piece of legislation that the Hispanic Caucus is working on in the next several months to provide us the support, the resources to address climate change. We've rejoined the Paris Climate Accord because it not only impacts ourselves in this country, but as the strongest economy in the world, we have a responsibility to lead. And therefore, as your member of Congress, working together with the Hispanic Caucus, we will do everything we can to become better stewards of our environment. And that's the goal, to make it a more healthier planet. After all, it's the only one we have. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Abelardo De La Vega and I lead seed product development for Corteva in Latin America and Africa. Corteva is the largest pure-play agriculture company in the world, with over 20,000 employees and with product offerings in seeds, crop protection, and digital agriculture. Half of our business and our employees are US-based, in more than 90 locations, with global business centers in Indiana and Iowa, and our headquarters in Delaware. As a multinational company, we also have a significant footprint in the Latin American region. We have more than 20,000 R&D centers distributed mainly in Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, and Chile, where we have hundreds of employees working to deliver the best corn, soy, sorghum, and sunflower varieties to our customers. At Corteva, we place the farmer at the very center of all that we do. Through our research experience, our product innovation and agronomy support, the products and solutions we deliver are designed to ensure that our world's farmers are more productive, profitable, and sustainable. Last year, Corteva announced 14 sustainability goals that we'll achieve over the next 10 years. Among these goals, we pledge to enable farmers to increase crop yields by 20% while also reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 20% within our own cropping systems. We believe in the power of an inclusive workforce and supply chain to enable us to deliver innovative solutions to best serve our global customers. And we continue to explore opportunities to collaborate with customers, farmers, suppliers, and other industry stakeholders to address equity issues in agriculture. We are proud to be a sponsor of premier organizations such as the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute as a forum to engage the next generations of Latino leaders. At Corteva, we are dedicated to continued innovation and delivering solutions necessary to address the many sustainability challenges we face today and tomorrow. Our ask of you is that you look to companies such as Corteva to be part of the solution and that we continue to have dialogues like this. We are in this together. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Angelique Lizardi. I am a broadcast journalist based out of Tucson, Arizona. I work for the local NBC station, News 4 Tucson, KVOA Television. It is an absolute pleasure to be here with everyone, our panelists, and of course, our audience here. Of course, it is Hispanic Heritage Month. I am a proud Latina myself. We are happy to be here with CHCI and, of course, all of our Latino audience who is joining us today. First and foremost, we want to thank Congressman Jim Costa for his remarks, as well as Dr. Abelardo De La Vega for his remarks as well. Before we begin this panel discussion, we do want to share some interesting points in regards to climate change. That is what we will be discussing today. Just some interesting facts for you. According to the USDA, climate change is very likely to affect food security at the global, regional, and local level. Climate change can disrupt food availability, reduce access to food, and also affecting food quality. These issues can disproportionately impact Latino communities now and, of course, into the future. Also, according to USDA's 2017 Census of Agriculture, 112,451 producers who identified as Hispanic, Latino, and Spanish origin account for 3.3% of the country's 3.4 million producers in 2017. And one last interesting point here, in 2017, the top states for Hispanic producers were Texas, California, New Mexico, and Florida. Of course, we are going to get into a much deeper discussion regarding climate change, and right now we are going to introduce our panelists this afternoon who will be taking part in this discussion. Our very first panelist to join us today is Andres Jimenez. He is our Executive Director from Green 2.0. Andres, it is an absolute pleasure to have you with us today.
What an exciting time. We all look forward to and love Hispanic Heritage Month. We look forward to the events that CHCI bring together because it brings so many people from all over the country to listen to so many different voices that need to be heard, community voices, voices from all different sectors that have something important to say, and it needs to be said. So again, I'm really excited to be joining such a fantastic panel, and I'm really excited to be talking with you, Angelique, today. Thank you.
Andres, thank you so much again for joining us. We look forward to hearing from you with these questions. Moving along, our second panelist joining us today is William Hohenstein, Director of the Office of Energy and Environmental Policy at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Mr. Hohenstein, it's a pleasure to have you joining us this afternoon.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Angelique, and I'm very happy to join this forum with these great panelists. Again, I'm Bill Hohenstein, the Director of the Office of Energy and Environmental Policy at USDA. We coordinate the department's climate change program, and so when you talked about the facts from USDA about climate change, it's our office that prepares that information. We provide guidance and advice to the Secretary. We help implement our programs, and again, we have a lot going on when it comes to addressing climate change in agriculture, so I'm happy to be here.
Again, thank you so much for being with us. We will be hearing from you during the discussions. A third, as far as our panelist goes, is Natasha Santos. She is a Vice President, Head of Global Stakeholder Strategy and Affairs, Bayer AG. Natasha, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy and so proud to be here today to share a little bit about our collaboration and partnership and action in such an important topic you just shared with us on your remarks. I think we have to address, we have to put action on this. So with my global position and everything that we are doing globally in the US, I hope we can exchange more today and really looking forward sharing more and listening from the other panelists as well. So pleasure and proud to be here. Thank you.
Natasha, thank you so much. It's great to have you here. And our last panelist who is joining us today is Catherine Unger. She is Vice President of Government Relations of North America at Cargill Incorporated. Catherine, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me here. And it's an honor to be in my second year in a row at the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute conference this year. So thank you. I'm really passionate about this topic and about sustainability because I believe that every human being deserves to drink clean water, eat healthy foods, and live their best lives. So I'm really proud to work for a company with the goal of nourishing the world in a safe, responsible, and sustainable way. In fact, last year, for the last 2 years, really during the coronavirus, my husband and I operated a small farm in North Carolina, and we operated it in as sustainable a manner as we knew. But we were able to learn firsthand the challenges associated with food production, both produce and livestock. And it was a great eye-opener for us just on what that challenge is. So excited to be here and looking forward to the discussion with a new perspective after the last 2 years of farming.
Wonderful, Catherine. We are looking forward to this discussion with you and, of course, with the rest of the panelists. So we are going to begin right away right now with our first question. And that first question is going to be directed towards Andreas from Green 2.0. Andreas, I'm going to ask you that question right now, and then we will have you respond. This is the question. Set the scene on what we are currently going to discuss today. What is the state of climate change as it relates to our natural resources? And what should the public know about the lack of diversity, culturally appropriate policymaking in the climate change or conservation movement? Andreas.
All right, Angelique, great question. Great way to kick it off. Great way for all of us to really set the stage on how we're going to go about this conversation today. But first, I have to say, Catherine, it's so great to hear about you and your husband and the farm. That it's always great to hear those personal stories and great to hear what folks are doing out there. So let me set the stage. At Green 2.0, we work to increase the racial and ethnic diversity of the environmental movement by providing research, data, and education to environmental organizations, foundations, and other stakeholders, Angelique. Our organization is a watchdog organization, which is ensuring the environmental movement is diverse. It has to be diverse. We cannot, Angelique, move forward. We cannot have success unless we are bringing community voices, the voices of so many diverse backgrounds to the conversation. Angelique, I've always said, it's not enough to have a seat at the table. We need to make sure that we have a voice as well. And so that is something that's always driven us. We at Green 2.0 strive to do one thing. It's to make sure that organizations and foundations are going to be changing and wanting to change at a cultural level. If organizations and foundations don't truly change culturally, nothing else matters because we're skipping over everything else if organizations and foundations aren't culturally changing. We need these organizations and foundations to change in order to be able to move the environmental sector, the environmental movement forward. We need to make sure that we are creating a path for youth, that we are creating a safe space, that we're creating voices, because if we do not do this, going back, Angelique, to what we all said at the very beginning, we can't have these important conversations that talk about the problems that are happening in underserved communities, in communities of color. These are critical issues that we need to really sit down, pay attention to, talk about, and find ways to solve before we continue to move forward.
Excellent, Andreas. And I completely, do see your point in terms of diversity being so imperative now more than ever right now throughout our country. If the other panelists perhaps want to chime in with this question, and then we will move forward to the next question.
Well, I was going to say, Cargill, first of all, has been really paying attention to the fact that in our country, we do have some additional work to do from a diversity perspective to overcome some generations in food and ag. And I'm really thrilled to see the work that the USDA is doing in that space now. And Cargill is also working in that space. And the example we have is our Black Farmer Initiative, which I can talk about later. I'm not sure just how much you want to jump into this topic now, but it's one we're really passionate about. And we've got maybe a model, which is kind of public-private partnerships on these that can really help to improve the representation of diversity in agriculture.
Yeah, well, let me just say this. With the Biden administration, there were 4 priorities right out of the box. It was, restoring the economy, addressing COVID, addressing climate change, and the work on climate change actually can help restore the economy and can help generate greater equity across rural America. We're starting this process by listening, and we started with a request for information, with listening sessions. That process continues, but I think, as Andrea said really well, it's not enough to have a seat at the table. You need a voice. And so I think it's really important for the Hispanic community to think about how climate change affects the growers. Some of the regions and states that you mentioned are some of the ones that are most vulnerable to climate change: Texas, Florida, Arizona, California. Those are the areas that we're most concerned about with a changing climate. There are many of those areas, water stress, water is going to be more limiting. There are very difficult challenges ahead, but also great opportunities. And so it's a really good time for the community to be thinking about how to position to be successful in a changing climate.
Those are all very great points that you are all making. I'm going to go into the second question, and of course, anybody can jump into the discussion once the question is asked for our appropriate panelist. So this next question is going to be for Cargill North America. Catherine, this is your question. For many people in our audience who are watching, they know something about climate change. However, they may not know very much about production agriculture. Could you talk briefly about the role production agriculture plays in our everyday lives and how it is being impacted by climate change? Catherine.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I mentioned before, my husband and I really didn't have a true, even working for Cargill, like so many others, of what it takes to produce agriculture. And before COVID, many of us didn't know about that either. But just in 2 pieces of the question, pre-COVID, I think when a lot of communities and countries were forced to take shutdown measures to protect people, we all became very aware of the farmers and ranchers and workers across the global food system who really stepped up to meet that challenge. In particular, Cargill employees who did so much with not having the luxury of home and still follow all the COVID protocols, like wearing all day, which is really difficult. So I think after this last year and a half, all of us have a better appreciation for food. But how does the climate piece fit into that? Within Cargill, we really have been talking internally and externally about how agriculture and our food systems are threatened by climate change. And we believe ag is how we can help solve a lot of these climate changes that we're facing. So, for example, right now, I think Canada is going through a drought that's impacting their production. Well, we think that partnering with farmers and ranchers and producers of all sizes to adopt regenerative ag practices that sequester carbon, improve soil health, protect our water resources, increase yields and profits would be good for everyone. And I'll just give you one example of that. We've got a program to train, I think it's 10 million farmers in sustainable ag practices cases globally by 2030, and we're at 3.2 million today. And another quick example is we're supporting the adoption of regenerative ag on 10 million acres in the US alone. And the possible carbon sequestration of that is equal to taking about 1 million cars off the road. So summary, ag is definitely impacted by climate, but ag can also be how we address some of these climate issues.
Let me just build on that, being succinct, but I think the reply from Cargill was very spot on. I think what we are trying to build, we are trying to put agriculture as part of the solution to climate change, not part of the problem, part of the solution, creating systems that are inclusive and farmer-centric in a way that we make a system that is profitable for farmers, is inclusive for farmers, perhaps create new revenue streams for farmers. And of course, they can work and they can get connected to those carbon markets that is out there globally and in the US. So what we are trying to do is a farmer-centric, what we advocate for, and I can talk about my organization as well, but what we are advocating for is farmer-centric approach to sustainability in agriculture. And that's why I'm so proud and so passionate about agriculture, because you have amazing stories and anything that you do has so much impact in livelihood. So that's the focus, farmer-centric approach, sustainability is an opportunity, and agriculture can be part of the solution for climate change and other societal challenges that we have. So that's why it's so timely for us to be here today talking about that.
And it's just to really hit this point home, when you're looking at agriculture and farmers, these aren't Republican and Democratic issues. These are issues that are impacting the livelihoods of rural Central America. These are issues that are impacting families. And if they do the right thing, and if our government helps them, as Natasha mentioned, let's talk about credits for farmers. If our government helps farmers, helps the ag industry, everyone wins. The environment wins, we win, the farmers win. And so it is not a red issue versus a blue issue. It's not a Republican versus a Democratic issue. We need to be viewing it through that lens, not through the lens of who's going to win, Republicans or Democrats.
Oh, I was just saying I love that, because if we don't make our farmers successful, none of us will be successful.
All right, well said. Thank you so much for all of your comments. We will move on now to the third question, and that question is for USDA. William Hohenstein, this is the question for you. I will read it. Agriculture contributes a significant share of greenhouse gas emissions that contribute to climate change. What farming policies does USDA have in place or plan to put in place to help farmers combat agriculture's impact on climate change? Mr. Hohenstein.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And climate change is one of Secretary Vilsack's top priorities. And so it is, folks across the department are working on this as we speak. Within the US, agriculture is responsible for about 10% of overall US emissions. And so it's not an insignificant amount. And it's hard to address climate change comprehensively without addressing what's happening within the ag sector. There are lots of technologies and practices where we can work with farmers to reduce emissions, sequester carbon, and improve productivity, and make their farms more resilient to climate change. And so we're working on plans to integrate these practices into the conservation programs. We work with farmers around the country to improve sustainability and to improve conservation practices on the farm. We have responsibility for the National Forest System. We're developing plans to make those forests more resilient to climate change, to reduce wildfire risk, and to improve forest health. And USDA also works with rural communities. We have large programs with rural utilities producing electricity. We're working to identify ways to decarbonize the electricity that's produced from these utilities, working with our rural housing service to work with rural communities to employ residential solar and to improve energy efficiency in the housing market that we support. So there are things across the department that we can be doing to address greenhouse gas emissions, increase carbon sequestration. It's a priority for the secretary, and it's becoming a priority for all of our programs across the department.
Isn't that fantastic, Angelique? It's just a remark, because USA has been doing for a long time, and it's been doing a lot of great work into the sustainability of the agriculture system in the US. And can you imagine, it's so important to our continent, but can you imagine an agriculture that is carbon positive, is climate positive, brings so many other co-benefits like water efficiency, like soil health, that is so important to the sustainability outcomes that we are looking for the food system sustainability that we are looking for. And this is being supported, and this is being powered by private mechanism, market mechanism, but as well public policy. So it's something that's so powerful that US can really set an example globally. So it's really exciting to be working on this sector.
Thank you so much, Natasha. And Natasha, we might as well keep going, because this next question is for you. It is for Bayer AG, so we will move along here. Here's the question, Natasha. It's farmers are particularly impacted by extreme weather conditions, which include drought, severe heat, flooding, etc. These all pose challenges for farmers as they work to grow enough food. What is Bayer doing to help farmers find methods to transform agriculture in ways that will address climate change? Natasha.
Thank you for the question. And that's the part that I'm very passionate. I'm a very purpose-driven professional. I've been working in agriculture for almost 2 decades, and I do it because I love it. So I'm going to answer your question perhaps with 2 thematic areas. One, really around innovation and some of the technology and practices that we can bring to farmers. And another, just one example from a partnership landscape. But the first one is really our work bringing to farmers around the world new technologies in a different way for them to be incentivized, as I referenced in agriculture, with innovation practices to help them produce more with less. And then I just wanted to bring 2 examples. One is what we call smart corn systems. Those are new hybrids we call short stature corn because they're really short. It helps to minimize lodging impact caused by climate change. So it helps with the climate change resiliency. It helps with the ability to grow the same amount of food on less land and in place where it makes sense, for example, like Mexico or even the US, where we invest on this technology, we can plant it densely, which helps to reduce food loss in fields, 40% even less. So it's really that holistic approach. And currently we are evaluating with farmers its potential to be more tolerant to drought because of its deeper roots. So it's an entire whole system that can contribute to a lot of sustainability outcomes in agriculture. Another example I want to share, which I'm very proud of, my team's working a lot on that, as many people in our organizations, but is our carbon initiative. The US was the first country we launched it. We expanded to Argentina, to Brazil. Now we are looking at smallholders farmers in Asia, in Latin America. And that's about rewarding farmers for adoption of climate smart practices like cover crops and no-till. But it's not only creating those revenue streams. We really want to increase resilience, climate resilience of the system, and make, as we mentioned already, make agriculture part of the solution. And to make agriculture part of the solution to climate change, we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions of the system, but we need, as Cargill mentioned, we need to capture carbon in the soil so we can create that climate positive, backed by science, backed by evidence, but we can create that climate positive agriculture that we want to, and then being part of the solution. And then lastly, to answer your question, just around partnerships, because we don't have answers to everything. We need to work with the farmers, but we need to work with the value chain. We need to work with the public sector to really bring that holistic and inclusive system that we need for farmers. And then an example I wanted to share with you is a collaboration that we are driving across the Americas. We rally behind Dr. Ratan Lal. He is from the Ohio State University. He's a very famous soil scientist, and is the initiative around Living Soils of the Americas, supported by IICA. And this is unite the public and private efforts in the fight against something very important, which is soil degradation. We are training with other partners. We are training and supporting farmers to implement those better agronomic practices that tackle this challenge of soil degradation. And the nice part is that we are using not only Bayer's, but the partners' knowledge to help measure, report, and verify reduction of carbon emission and storage in the soil to potentially link those farmers to global carbon markets. And here, because of the power of collaboration, we are doing this in places like Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Colombia, Chile, Mexico, and hopefully others. So it goes all over the continent, and in crops like, of course, soybean, but coffee, banana, and others that we are exploring. And this is really exciting because unite science, unite value chain collaboration, and we believe that the outcomes of this work with those farmers in the continent can really transparently be used as policy advice for those governments as well, to support them in the end, to connect those farmers with the market mechanisms that we need to make agriculture more sustainable, inclusive, and profitable for farmers. So just those two examples that I think really brings the power of private sector and really action to make the change and to contribute to the system as we want. Thank you, Angelique.
Natasha, thank you. Andreas, many environmental organizations and foundations have been working to support Latino communities. Can you discuss more about what these key players have done so far and what more they need to do to ensure that Latinos are leading in the movement against climate change? Andreas.
Angelique, thank you. Great to be on the spot again. And Natasha, it's always great when I hear Colombia. I'm Colombian, born in Bogota, so that's always great to hear. But to get back to the actual question, Angelique, NGOs and foundations that have supported Hispanic communities and staff focus on integrating diversity and equity into all aspects of their policy. And so what that means is that foundations and organizations are really making some strides when it comes to putting into their strategic mission language around diversity and inclusion, and what that means, not only for their mission looking outward, but for their mission looking inward. A lot of the organizations are membership driven, volunteer driven, and that extends into the states where they have volunteer leads. And that means that that's the way that they are moving forward. It's not enough, I always say, to just talk about it. It's not enough to just bring someone in and say, let's have a conversation. So William and I can have a conversation for about 2 hours and it's all well and good. But if we're working in the same organization and we're not writing this down, if there's not a record of what's happening, it's just a conversation. But when you actually implement it, when you put it into your strategic mission, when you make it so that other staff, future staff as well, are able to look back and say, this is part of the mission and the core of this organization's values, then that changes the whole landscape. That changes how the organization or the foundation moves forward. And that you can't undo as easily as just saying, oh, William and I had a conversation. Did we, didn't we? But obviously, I'd always love to talk to William. So that's one way. Foundations have made a clear priority to say that they do want to fund organizations that are led by people of color, for people of color, and helping communities of color. Now, is that true? And is that happening? Well, that's a reason why Green 2.0 exists. That's exactly what we look into. We look into how organizations are doing when it comes to being transparent and hiring and culture change. We look at foundations to see, are the pledges and the promises that they are making to the communities that need their funding, are they actually happening? And so we do this through several ways. We have our annual report card. We have several reports a year. And so I think it's really important for the entire environmental community to be able to look back every year and look at these reports and say, what is actually happening? Are these promises being kept? Where are we when it comes to the state of diversity in the environmental movement? And so these are all things that we do, that we push, and these are some of the things that organizations and foundations have been doing in the recent last year and the year before to try to move the ball forward and try to be and prioritize diversity, as they should have, Angelique, all along.
Andres, thank you. We have one more question before we move on to the audience question. And this last question will be for William Hohenstein. William, for the USDA, lastly, you did mention President Biden, so that is what this question is. President Biden has been working to address the climate crisis. The administration's actions have focused on an environmental justice strategy. Could you talk for a few minutes about the administration's environmental justice strategy and how this strategy will help the Latino community?
Sure, thank you for that. As we get into this question, I've been with the government for 30 years and been with USDA for 20 years. And when I started working on climate change, it was something in the future. And I think Andreas's points are really important. This is not something that is going to happen. We can see it in the data. It's happening. Farmers are responding to it, and there's an urgency about it. But it's important to address climate change in the context of all of the other issues that we're dealing with in society. And that's where the work on environmental justice comes in. There's a Justice 40 initiative, which is specifically focused at our larger programs, ensuring that as we implement them, they're implemented equitably. There'll be benchmarks and scoring on how that's done and accountability. But I think, even more importantly, there's an integration of these concerns about equity in everything we're doing, from research right on through. And one of the things that we're focused on is making sure that we're doing research that applies at all scales. Many Latino Hispanic farmers might be smaller farmers, some might be disadvantaged, and maybe not have been the central focus of USDA programs in the past. A lot of USDA programs focused on larger farmers, bigger operations, and a lot of the research was focused on that. And so we're starting from the ground up, from how we're evaluating technologies and practices, making sure they're applicable at scale, that we can apply them on smaller and all farms, and that we're inclusive as we think about not just the program side, but making sure that the technologies and practices are appropriate for farmers at all scales.
Thank you so much. And thank you for answering all those important questions. Great discussion here. We are now going to move along with our audience questions. And Catherine, we'll start with you. I'm going to ask the first question. There are a total of 4 questions for all panelists. Catherine, question number 1 is, climate change is changing our planet at an accelerating, unprecedented, and irreversible rate. What are some strategies to alleviate the most devastating projections of climate change and protect our most vulnerable communities? Catherine.
Well, no, I love the question. And as we were talking about before, we really think that focusing on the farmers is the way to do that. And within Cargill, we also believe that continually innovating and disrupting our industry through better technologies, that is how we're going to feed a growing global population and address the climate change issues that are facing the global food system. We believe that it's through that science-based agriculture that we bring these technologies and disrupt to our farmers, that we can have more resilient and adaptable produce, and in doing so, having farmers being more resilient and adaptable as well. And that will protect our food supply and help us all protect against climate change challenges.
Catherine, thank you. We will move on to the second question. And Natasha, we can have you answer this one. This question is, more than 19% of American Latinos were food insecure in 2020. And of course, we all know that the COVID-19 pandemic did not help with this situation. What are successful programs or initiatives in place that can serve as models to combat food insecurity?
That's a great, thank you. That's a great question. And that's something we should never forget. Food insecurity it's really, really an issue. And after the COVID crisis, of course. So this is something we advocate for. Food security is very important. And I think there is a lot of interesting programs. I think USDA has put it together, a lot of programs on COVID relief, on support to specific minorities that were running under food insecurity. There was a lot of programs in local economies as well, local farmers market, to be able to use those credits and to be able to access local produce products. So I think there is a lot of good examples. As private sector, for sure, this is top of mind for us. It's top of mind for us to create a system that creates food that is accessible and affordable around the world, and then that's what I mentioned a lot about value chain partnerships, because creating a way that produce is delivered into the markets and is delivered to the value chain in a way that reaches consumers in an affordable way. So I think, of course, in times of crisis, interventions by government, but as a private sector, actions that really help to create that food that is affordable and that reach consumers in the market appropriately, either by local or by international trades, is the way forward, and is the way we can tackle and work holistically around the issue of food insecurity, particularly to minorities.
Natasha, thank you. Very, very interesting information. We are going to move along. We are going to go now to William Hohenstein. William, this is the third question, and I will ask you, how can the private sector be incentivized to adopt carbon sequestration strategies or effectively utilize carbon offsetting credits?
Sure, that's something we're very interested in at USDA. There's a lot of opportunity for the private sector to partner with farmers. Farmers can reduce emissions, increase carbon sequestration, and in many cases do it very cost effectively. And so there are companies across the board, from Bayer and Cargill to companies that have no real connection with the agriculture space, Microsoft and Amazon and others. They're interested in making corporate commitments, reducing their emissions, reducing their greenhouse gas footprint. We're looking at ways where we can make those connections and partner the agricultural producers with where the demand for these reductions is. And some of that means having good accounting and scoring, making sure we can understand how we quantify the benefits of specific practices, and then making sure that we can do it in a way that farmers can manage it in the context of all the other complex things they're doing within their operations.
Yeah.
William, thank you. Natasha, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I was just, I think the point is of farmers being able to manage. Farmers make so many decisions by second almost in their farm. They are under so much pressure, climate conditions, weather pressure. So it's such a risk job. It's such a risk activity. So everything that we can do to de-risk that activity, to reward them differently, to help them, not only with the technology and the practices. So I was agreeing with William and just reminding our, viewers and perhaps people that are not so close to agriculture, it is all size, large, small scale. It is a really hard job, and we should be proud, and we should be working to support them in moving, of course, together with them into much more and more sustainability future, as we are already doing, is a reality. So just wanted to put that remark and remind us that it's a really tough job.
Natasha, thank you. We are going to go to our fourth question. Andres, I will direct that question to you. And of course, anyone else can jump in on this discussion since it is the last question. So far, we're okay with moving along here. So question number 4, Andres. Since climate change is a global issue, are there any international collaborations working on the impact of climate change on food production and agriculture?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many different groups that are partnering, and it's so fantastic to see every day. I mean, if there's one win during this last year and a half or 2 years, it's that being able to talk to one another and have these panels has become easier, and the audiences for these panels has grown. It keeps growing because they're more accessible. And so when you bring groups, international groups, national groups together, and you're having these kind of events and saying, this is accessible, all you need to do is jump on the Zoom and listen, or you're able to be part of a panel, it opens up a huge floodgate of information and education and new ideas. And so what is better than combining all of those things? And you make it so that it's been made so that it's really easy to be able to join. It's free to join so many of these conferences, these panels, and it's through mediums like that that different countries will be able to work together, different groups are going to be able to work together, and we'll all be able to learn nationally and internationally from one another moving forward. And the one thing, just to kind of reiterate, Angelique, is that we do need to make sure always to bring in diverse voices. We need to be making sure that we're hearing from different sectors, from different communities, because unless we do, like I mentioned right at the beginning, we're not doing ourselves a favor, and we won't be able to have change accelerated. We will be stuck where we are. So we absolutely need to be learning from these diverse and wonderful backgrounds and these amazing communities.
We will move along and we will begin our panel closing remarks. This is an opportunity for you to mention some takeaways from this discussion. We've talked certainly about very important issues here. So each and every one of you can say your remarks to the audience on what you're passionate about regarding our issue with climate change. Andres, we will begin with you first.
Putting me on the spot at the beginning and now at the end, but that's all right. Some takeaways here is, what did we keep hearing throughout this panel? We kept on hearing the need for education, the need for inclusivity, the need to bring together groups so that we can all work on this together. No one can do it alone. We need to come together. We need to find solutions. Luckily, and as William was mentioned, the current administration is doing something fantastic. They are not just talking, but they're listening. They're bringing groups like Green Latinos in. They're bringing groups of all different sorts in to listen. And the biggest part of this is listening. We need to educate one another. We need to listen to one another, and that's how we'll succeed. So thank you, Angelique.
Okay, and we will move along here. We do have some time for you to share your thoughts. Catherine Unger, we would love to hear your closing remarks regarding all these very important issues we've been discussing.
Well, thanks so much. And first, it's just been an honor to be here with Andres and William and Natasha. It's been wonderful to hear the topic. It's so nice that we've had more panels and forums like this in which to engage. And as I've been sitting here listening to everything that the USDA has been doing and Cargill and Bayer and individual farmers, it's going to take that public-private partnership. It's going to take courage. And I love both what Andres and the USDA said about listening. Cargill has been working, for example, with our Black Farmers Initiative. And when we started that initiative, the first thing we did was listen to farmers. What are the problems? What are the challenges you're having in terms of access of your product to the marketplace and all of these other things? And we think that that's the same thing that's needed as we address access for farmers of all colors to greater prosperity in the agricultural space. And as Natasha said, there's not a single farmer out there who's not just working so hard every single day. Anything we can do to make our farmers more productive is the country, it's good for the world, it's good for the climate. So I'm really excited to be here. It's an honor, and thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Catherine. Yes, and Natasha, of course, we'd love to hear your closing remarks as well.
Thank you very much, Angelique. And I want to thank you all, Andres, William, Natasha, it's me, Andres, William, Catherine, everyone. Really, it was a great honor to be here. And I think what unites us, and it makes really proud to be in this dialogue today, is that we were not talking about visions or dreams or ideas. We were talking about action, public and private action, things that we are doing now that we want to scale to support farmers and to create with them an inclusive and profitable and sustainable future for agriculture. And that's such a nice vision and nice action to rally behind. So I think what united us today was action, was like-minded way forward in agriculture, and always having that farmer-centric approach. So really honored to be here, really honored to be on the topic that, of course, not only climate change, but talking with Latinos. That is my background as well. It really makes me very proud. So all the viewers, thank you for listening to us. And of course, personally, if anyone wants to know more about agriculture, perhaps doesn't know much, please always reach out to me. Of course, my organization as well, because we all advocate for farmers and for a better future for agriculture. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And last but not least, William.
Well, thank you, Angela. I'm going to close with 3 points. And I think the first just is to remind the listeners about the urgency of addressing climate change. Not only seeing climate change, but in absence of real climate action, the changes we're seeing are not just going to continue, they're going to accelerate. And so this is the time to address emissions, address carbon sequestration, reduce the buildup of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, not for today, but for future generations. The second point is that we at USDA are listening. We are not, both formally and informally, we certainly want to hear the views and understand the views from the broad array of stakeholders that we serve throughout the country. And the final thing is just the importance of partnerships. We're not going to do this alone as a federal government or even federal and state governments. That it's really critical that the private sector play an important role, that NGOs play an important role and hold our feet to the fire. But my favorite projects are the ones that involve an array of stakeholders, an array of partners. And so there's lots of opportunities with the attention that's being put on climate change, and with it being a high priority, not just for Secretary Vilsack, but for the president as well.
Thank you so much, William, Natasha, Catherine, and Andres. Some very good points being made during our discussion today. We've highlighted some imperative issues that are going on throughout our country, but like Natasha did mention, that we are taking action. They're just not ideas. We are trying to do something about it, especially when it does come to climate change. But to narrow it in a little bit more, we're focusing more on the Latino community, which is essential right now. Obviously, September is Hispanic Heritage Month. It is something that should be highlighted. We discussed diversity, which is absolutely essential right now within our communities. It is very surprising that the Latino community makes up of such a big population throughout the country when it comes to farmers, agriculture, not just in California, in New Mexico, in Florida, as we mentioned, but also surprisingly here where I am in Arizona. We have a very big population when it does come to farming. It is something that is essential. We have our local farmers here who do face challenges due to the climate. We've really focused on a lot of that. So hearing from each and every one of you with your expertise and trying to understand what exactly is happening right now is very imperative, I think, for our viewers who are watching us today to really understand and hone in on what those issues are, and perhaps how we can localize this for people to really understand what is going on, just like Catherine mentioned, when it comes to growing our own produce. Food insecurity is huge right now with a lot of communities. Food banks need so much food in general for their communities that there sometimes is lack, and we don't realize how many people, how many communities of color, as Andreas had mentioned, that are being jeopardized due to this. And to add on top of that, we're also dealing with a pandemic, which is obviously affecting this as well. So having all four of you here to discuss this and give your input is very important, but it is very special to have all of you here together. I just really want to thank all of you for your time and to be able to be here virtually and discuss this topic. Of course, there's going to be many more sessions to discuss. But again, I just want to highlight each and every one of you. We have Catherine Unger again here from Cargill. And we also have Natasha Santos. We have here from Bayer AG, William Hohenstein from USDA. And of course, Green 2.0, we have Andres Jimenez with us. Again, it's a pleasure to be here with all of you during our Hispanic Heritage Month. We do want to make it very clear that you can keep following us on Twitter for this conference, the 2021 CHCI conference. And of course, we do have that important hashtag for you to use. during this time. That hashtag is once again hashtag CHCIHHM21. We do have a full slate of sessions scheduled, and I encourage all of you to attend these sessions throughout the days to come. There are a lot of important topics, and I know if there are people that are interested in the conference but haven't signed up yet, we do encourage them to log in and register, and you can do that at chci.org. A lot of interesting sessions coming up. Again, it has been a pleasure to be your moderator this afternoon with these wonderful panelists. Again, I'm Angelique Lizardi, and thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.